Welcome back to GynoCurious. I'm your host and creator, Dr. Amy Novatt. From both sides of the speculum, we're here to investigate what it means to be a healer and to be healed. Please send me your questions and comments. I want to hear from you. Comments at radiofreerhinecliffe.org. And if you're interested in my clinical practice, both in person or virtual, please go to dramynovatt.com. And I'm now providing a 15-minute free introduction if you want to get to know me a little bit better or talk about why you're interested in seeing me. I'm really glad to have that conversation with you. So today's conversation takes us somewhere a little different, but no less essential. We're here to talk about local elections. This conversation is a continuation of prior GynoCurious episodes, specifically number 51 and 93, if you want to refer back to them. I just feel that anyone who's listening, particularly those who are living in Dutchess County, be aware of and vote in the election this November for the Dutchess County Court Judge. Local elections have profound effects on our daily lives. They influence school funding, zoning laws, public safety, access to health care, and so much more. Voting isn't just a way to shape the future. It's a civic duty that honors those who fought for the right to vote, and especially for those in communities who have historically been excluded or silenced in the political process. Although we're talking about a local Dutchess County election, I want to remind everyone who's listening, no matter what county, state, or country you might call home, that voting in your local elections is so critical. Unfortunately, the turnout for local elections tends to be kind of painfully low, which means that we're forfeiting the real opportunity to impact meaningful change close to home. So please vote. Now, my bias after over 100 episodes of GynoCurious is very clear. I am a woman's health advocate through and through. And if you've listened to past episodes of GynoCurious, you've heard how interconnected health is with nearly every aspect of our lives. The chronic stress of being a woman in this world takes a toll, whether it's ongoing fight for pay equity, for equal access to medical care, quality health care, for medical science that treats women as more than just small men, or for laws that finally and fully protect us from violence. These are issues that shape our physical, emotional, and social well-being. Politics may feel very far away at times, but when it comes to our bodies, our health, and our rights, local leadership matters. Today, to help you understand how important this November 2025 election is, I've invited Michelle Horton and Linsey Gatto to the studio. Michelle Horton is an author, sister, mother, and aunt who has worked tirelessly to protect domestic violence victims and survivors. Her book, Dear Sister, a memoir of secrets, survival, and unbreakable bonds, is something that I've talked about before on GynoCurious. I've had the pleasure of having her here before, and I'm so grateful for Michelle for being here again today. A new guest is Linsey Gatto, who's a member of the Nicole Addimando Community Defense Committee and part of its social media team. Linsey has worked as a marketing director for various organizations and most recently a content creator of an online community called Togetherish Mom. She is a mother of 2 boys and a lifelong resident of the Hudson Valley. Welcome, ladies. I'm so happy to see you here today.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, I'm so happy to be back here.
Thank you. So, Linsey, I have to kind of start with a question about this online community because we're all mothers in this studio today. Togetherish Mom. Can you talk to me about that, please?
Yeah, I didn't plan to, but yeah, it's just when I found myself with 2 young boys thrust into motherhood and this world, I realized how isolating it could be. And I just wanted to gather community and help others find it as well. So I created what was then a blog and is now a social media presence. And I've been lucky to have a great response and a great community that has joined me for that. So I'm now 6 years into Togetherish Mom.
It's great. It's great. Thanks, Linsey. So this is a subject matter that's actually really pertinent to our conversation today because the way local laws impact us moms, certainly our children, our communities, is so important and so far reaching, right? And it is striking that even in 2025 that we are talking about how separated we feel as mothers, how we still feel isolated at times. And certainly I know that when I was raising my kids when they were young, there were so often times where I just wanted to ask someone, is this happening to you as well? Like, how did you respond to this problem? And, I had some close friends, but there was always a little bit of hesitation to talk about some of the harder aspects, or if my kids were not, if you will, behaving, or if I really messed up. It was hard to admit to some of that. So thank you for creating that community. I'm sure it's so helpful for other people raising children.
Thank you. It's helpful for me too.
Yeah.
I find that it's a wonderful resource for myself as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So often what we do for others also brings us health and healing, which brings me to Michelle's book. And Michelle, there are folks who are listening today who I suspect may not know about your book and about Nikki's case. So if you would, just a brief description of what happened with Nikki, and then what inspired you to write the book that you did, which is so beautiful and so revealing and so important.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
So what happened with my sister was in 2017 in Poughkeepsie, after a very long, hidden, and just devastating situation of domestic violence. She had 2 toddlers just trying to survive, trapped in that relationship for all of the reasons mothers are trapped in these abusive relationships. It escalated to a situation where she had to defend her life or else she was going to be killed. A situation that unfortunately too many victims find themselves in, and too many victims end up being the one who is killed. In this situation, she was lucky enough to be able to defend herself. And as soon as she did, the criminal justice system in Dutchess County prosecuted her as a criminal. Her name was dragged through the newspaper. It was kind of, is she a monster or was she a victim? When the evidence clearly showed that she was a victim for a long time, and the county knew that. So I took in her kids and I watched, and also, along with Linsey and a lot of other women, we were part of a defense committee. So I was really in the nitty gritty of the legal situation that she was in. I watched what happened in the courtroom in the way that the newspaper never really reported. And at the end of, years of the legal situation from 2017 to 2020, she was ultimately sentenced to a life sentence in prison. I experienced something that needed to be shared for my own healing and understanding, but also so people can really have an inside look on what this does to a family, what this does to a community when a woman is disbelieved, when her evidence is suppressed, when she is painted to be a master manipulator, and all of the misogynistic language that was hurled at her, which I later learned was not at all just her, that is what is done to survivors who end up in the criminal legal system. And I felt I had a responsibility to show this. So I was a writer prior to all of this happening. I was very diligent about recording everything and very thoughtful in what I chose to share in it. And ultimately, I think I shared the most truth that I possibly could. And the way people have responded has been incredible in that they feel like their eyes have been opened to issues that they didn't know about. Their hearts have been opened to what the kids have gone through, what I have gone through, of course, what Nikki had gone through. And I'm really glad that this exists now for a reference for other people, but also just for my own healing.
Yeah. In a way, all of us, I guess, my doing this podcast, Linsey doing her online community building, and you're writing this book are vehicles in which we've shared our difficult stories and spoken out loud about them. Because so often what we experience in our personal lives, particularly difficult stuff, are kept hidden, right? And yet certainly you two have been very brave in bringing it forward. And one of the reasons that I do GynoCurious is because and I've said this many, many times, but it bears repeating, is so much of what I've learned, heard from women in the privacy of a clinical setting, which always remains private, but are often kind of universal truths, things that so many women are going through. And yet every single woman I see independently feels that she's the only one. And I would suspect that that's part of one of the, perhaps mythologies too about domestic violence, right? That the individual feels that she has perpetrated it, she's brought it on, she's the only one going through it. And of course, we know the statistics are, tell us absolutely that's not the case.
Yeah. Even societally, when somebody is killed, it's kind of treated as this, oh my goodness, like this, they seemed so normal. Everything seemed great. This is something that is wild and crazy. When really, if you look at what happened to that in that particular case, and you connect the dots to all of the other cases out there, there's a pattern, there's a predictability to it, and there are common threads amongst them all. And unfortunately, at the end of it is the woman, and sometimes even the children are killed.
Yeah. Can we talk a little bit about that? Maybe, Linsey, you can chime in. What are some of the mythologies and or those trends that Michelle speak about that might just help identify for someone listening to say, oh, interesting, maybe I have to think about my situation a little bit more, or they've all called me names and I know I'm not that. Can we kind of break down some of these mythologies and storylines, narratives that so many people have that are not true?
You mean about domestic violence victims?
Yeah.
Well, I think the most frequent myth that we hear all the time is that why didn't she just leave? And we hear that about women or, from men and women, alike. We hear that commentary. And I think it speaks to more than just a lack of understanding. I think it's that we ourselves want to feel that we're safer than we are. We want to other the victim to make ourselves feel like that couldn't happen to us or our sisters or our friends or our mothers, when in reality, it doesn't discriminate from, socioeconomic status or what type of person you are. And we want these, perfect victims. And we talk about that a lot as well in the work that we've done as a committee. We talk about how women who are victims of domestic violence, in order to be believed, they have to be perfect. They have to be monogamous. They have to look a certain way. They have to dress a certain way. They have to, and in the work that we did surrounding Nikki was as perfect of a victim as there ever would be. And still she was not believed, which was devastating to witness. And back to the mythology, the way I always look at it is I always say, if you look at it from a lens of believing a woman, it all makes perfect sense. If you look at the world trying to pick things apart and say, well, she could have done this, or this is where she went wrong, or, she could have fled the county and taken our kids and walked out the door and all these things that we hear, you're missing a big piece of it. But if you actually just look at it as imagining the fear that a mother and a woman would fear when she has her own life at stake, and no mother would ever choose to leave her child, in any way or put the children at risk, it makes perfect sense. When I heard about Nikki's story, I was not connected. Now Michelle and Nikki are both wonderful friends of mine. But when I first heard Nikki's story, I just believed it and I never questioned it. So it made perfect sense. And I was shocked to see the local publications getting it so wrong. And even just like Facebook posts and comments that people I knew were making, I was appalled by it. Because again, if you just look at it like she's telling the truth, then it all makes perfect sense. You don't get caught up in, oh, he was this type of person. He was a great guy. He would never.
Yeah. Do you have anything to add, Michelle?
Yeah. I mean, just what you just ended with, that is another myth, that we would somehow know when somebody was an abusive person, when the reality is that often people who are abusive behind closed doors wear a mask in public.
Yeah.
And it is not just who you think. It is someone who could be affluent and powerful and charismatic and maybe works with children. Like, these are really common. They're philanthropic. They are donating to their domestic violence shelters. They put on a good show because they know that if you ever talk about it, no one's going to believe you. That no one's going to believe you is it's paved well ahead of time. And also, what I learned that I didn't know prior to this is that there is an escalation. Part of the pattern is an escalation of violence, and that at the very beginning, there are red flags of coercive control that really should not be ignored for people who are listening, because it can escalate. Maybe not now, maybe not in 5 years, but in time, it can escalate to lethality. I know situations that happened even, apart from Nikki, where you go back in time and you can see all of the red flags. And over time, it gets harder and harder to be able to leave. And also, we know statistically the most dangerous time for a woman is when she does leave.
Yeah.
Because it is about control. And when they lose control, that's when lethality happens.
Yeah. In my clinical experience, what I've seen is that women will come in and say, oh, when we were dating, when we were in that honeymoon phase, he was so lovely and kind, etc. And then, as you've described, each kind of year of their, particularly if there's a marriage certificate and or there's children, the violence just escalates and changes and morphs into a reality that's just overwhelming and daunting and terrifying, etc. Yeah. Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about, Linsey, the Nicole Addimando Community Defense Committee? So you mentioned that you didn't know these ladies beforehand.
Yeah.
You clearly were bearing witness to the media frenzy around this case. How did you get yourself involved, and what's the role of this committee now?
Good question. How I got myself involved was just by showing up. So the committee, as they formed early on, it was just a small group of women, were immediately mobilizing and organizing and having meetups outside the court and sharing in a group where we could all attend and what we should wear and how to behave. And I just really respected the way that they were doing that and organizing in a way that I don't know really how anybody had the wherewithal to pull themselves together to do that. But I would show up at these events by myself. I would find childcare. It was very, very difficult because my kids were so young, but I just kept thinking Nikki's kids are similar ages to mine. Like, we have to show up for this person. And I would just show up. And eventually I was invited to become a member of the committee, which I was very, very honored by. And I think I was invited to become a part of the committee right after trial, right after sentencing, I think, is when.
Probably before sentencing.
You think it was before sentencing, but after trial. I think they realized that the task was now going to be larger than anticipated and take longer, and they would need more resources. So I was grateful to be asked to join. And it's been one of the greatest honors of my life, and the work that we've done has absolutely changed my life, changed my heart. And I think Michelle's book is a great testament to the spirit of the sisterhood that we all experience together. Michelle calls it lightning in a bottle. It's really hard to describe. It's not something that you see very often, but the work that we did was, we were under a pressure that none of us had ever experienced or likely will again, which was that we had to reunite this family. It was dire straits. We had to do everything we could to try to get Nikki home. And so we did for years. And as far as what our committee does right now, when we got Nikki home, I think we all took a moment to breathe. And Michelle's book came out that same month. So we helped promote the book and just kind of stayed connected. And now we have begun our regular meetings once again, because we find it very imperative that we involve ourselves and involve our voices with this local upcoming election for a judge in Dutchess County.
Great. That's where we're pivoting. Michelle, why don't you talk about why this election is particularly important for the Dutchess County Court Judge?
Well, the Dutchess County Court Judge sits for 10 years. So when my sister entered the court system, you're assigned one of two judges. She was assigned judge Edward McLaughlin. Didn't know much about him. I was hopeful that the evidence would speak for itself, that it would never even get to trial. That was the hope in the beginning. And so in 2018 is when, it took a very long time for prosecutors, the Dutchess County DA's office recused themselves from prosecuting because of reasons they didn't say, but the reason is because they had evidence of her as a victim prior. So it was moved to another county. There was all of these delays, and my sister was just sitting in jail waiting. And it wasn't until 2018 in the spring where the judge started to actually make rulings that we were like, uh-oh, this is not good, because every ruling was siding with the prosecution, even wild ones like removing Nikki's choice of counsel after 8 months because of a conflict that was not a conflict. We don't even have to go into it, or we can go into it. But as it was happening, and I would talk to other people who were kind of our sounding board in the legal system, does this hold any weight, this conflict of interest? And it was always like, no, absolutely not. This is just a Hail Mary by the prosecutor to delay grand jury. But the judge ruled to remove Nikki's choice of counsel, which really started a domino effect of her constitutional rights being violated and her defense being cut off at the knees. Then we move forward and all of these evidentiary hearings happen, and basically everything is suppressed. And, Nikki is in jail and she's in a state of being isolated. So it's on me as her family to kind of have these legal conversations. And I'm trying to ring bells and say, Judge McLaughlin used to work in the DA's office when Nikki was a victim, and they had, files of her being a victim from police officers. They knew what was going on, that there was an escalation in violence. There are 2 young kids. He has a registered gun. There should have been enough flags for an evidence-based prosecution. He was the bureau chief at the time. How is this not a conflict? And they said, you know what it is? So many judges were prosecutors that the protections for judges, it's almost impossible to remove a judge once they're in place. And this was in 2018. And they were like, he was basically just elected. So I thought of 2025 back then.
I bet.
To be like, I have to do everything that I can to make sure that people know about what he does and how he rules. And it just got worse and worse and worse until she was sentenced to 19 years to life. And the things that he said on the record were outrageous. His decisions were outrageous. And I find him to be a very dangerous person with deeply misogynistic and problematic views that span much beyond my sister. So it's really not just about her. But for me, I watched in the courtroom what happened. And just by crazy, weird coincidences, I also know the woman who's running against him. I watched her. Her name's Kara Gary. She was Nikki's counsel who was removed, which is just, she wasn't her trial attorney. Nikki wished she was, because unlike Nikki's trial attorneys and other attorneys that I had met, Kara was the only one to kind of take a beat and learn, to say, you know what, this is beyond the scope of my experience, and I'm going to talk to experts and I'm going to educate myself and I'm going to be measured and I'm going to be fair and I'm going to really take my time to understand my client. Whereas Nikki's trial attorneys were like, this is the way it is. And, with judges and lawyers, I have found in my experience, not to offend anybody, egos are very high sometimes. Is that fair to say?
It's been my experience too. There are some lovely attorneys out there who are trying to protect the environment and work on behalf of women. And
when we get the criminal
that's right.
system, there is a game that I did not know about, which I do try and shed light on in my book, because I think it's really important that we think we have these constitutional rights. There is an innocent until proven guilty. There is a fairness to it that is really smoke and mirrors. Yeah. It's not really true.
Yeah.
Which is why it's so imperative that we vote. Judges, not everywhere judges are elected. In New York State, judges are elected. It becomes political. It's so important that you don't just vote on party line. You really take time to understand who these people are, because this is not a 2 or 4 year term. This is a decade. And it is so hard. Judge McLaughlin is controversial beyond Nikki. He's controversial because a New York University study came out recently that looked at 140 New York State judges. He was 15th on the list for excessive sentencing. It is, first of all, so hard for any case to be overturned on an appeal. It is, I mean, the statistics we were quoted when Nikki was going through the appeal process was less than 1%.
Wow.
So the fact that he has multiple cases that are getting resentenced because they are excessive, that really says something. And I know there might be people who are like, well, you know, he should be sending people away. He's tough on crime. But excessive sentencing shows a pattern of what your judicial viewpoint is. It's punitive. It's not rooted in fairness. It wastes taxpayer dollars. For so many reasons, it is not the mindset of someone that you want in that position.
Yeah. The word I often use is theatrics.
Oh,
The
absolutely.
whole courtroom is a theater. And the players tend to be identified very early on, who's who. And the level of misogyny, the patriarchy, and the language used particularly against women who are victims of domestic violence has been reiterated over and over and over again. And this judge in particular is well known for it. And it just, of course, stirs my blood when I think, oh, the reason that all this evidence was hidden or not just revealed is because they were ashamed of their lack of follow through. Is just talk about criminal. That is criminal.
Yeah. And a lot of it happens in secret.
Of
So a lot of
course.
the evidentiary suppressions are happening in secret, and people want to believe that there must be a good reason for it.
Yeah.
And that the jury made this decision, which is something that if Judge McLaughlin was sitting here, I'm sure he would say that the jury made their decision. But the jury only knows what the judge allows them to
That's
do.
right. That's right.
There was a lot he had the capability to do in secret, but when it was time for him to make a statement during his sentencing, he could have just said, I've looked at all the evidence. This is my decision. He went on a very long monologue, much of which I transcribed from the transcripts into my book because I thought it was so important for people to see. But he said, he suggested to her, you know, nobody knows what goes on in an intimate relationship. Besides the fact that there was videos and photographs and people had witnessed horrific violence that was done against her. He said, perhaps you didn't want people to know you reluctantly consented. And I remember looking around the courtroom saying, did he just say that she reluctantly consented? Does he not understand that that's rape? When you're talking about sexual violence, saying maybe you reluctantly consented just puts the blame right on her. And then he said, clearly someone who's made the choices that you've made is a broken person. And I will tell you, what my sister has carried, besides the fact that the prosecutor just like completely rewrote her narrative and what people think about her is so wrong based on that, hearing his voice tell her she's a broken person, I mean, that takes a lifetime of healing to get over something like that.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter who broke her, right? It doesn't matter. I mean, first of all, she's not a broken person. It's just a horrifying thing to say to somebody when you're in that position of power.
Yeah.
But there was no motive. There was no money she could have. There was no proven love interest. They went through all of her texts and everything. I mean, that's all he could come up with is clearly you must be broken to make those choices. If he actually thinks that she reluctantly consented to all of the abuse he suppressed and that she's broken, I mean, how are we allowing him to be making these decisions?
Yeah. And Linsey, I think we'd all agree, this is not a legal term, you are broken. This is a commentary. This is an editorial. This is his opinion, which again, you know, is not supposed to be a part of the legal proceedings. He's supposed to be carrying out the law, right? Interpreting the law. Oh my goodness. I was not in the courtroom during all of this. I was keeping close tabs through a number of mutual friends who were very much involved with the defense committee and in the courtroom. And Linsey, how did you when you hear someone say these kind of things, how do you deal with it? I mean, you just want to scream.
It was very shocking because I think throughout trial we had hoped that he was seeing things for what they really were, especially because he did see all of the evidence that the jury didn't necessarily get to see. And so, we would sit there and just look at him and be like, surely he sees what's happening, even though the prosecutor is spinning this whole web and trying to make Nikki appear a certain way. But we just, again, naively believe that the truth prevails in a courtroom.
Yeah.
And to tag back to what I was talking about earlier with like, we want to feel like we're safe. And that's why we like to blame women, or we choose to resort to blaming women. We also very much want to believe that justice is served in a courtroom. And that was really, really shocking. And we were appalled. And I can remember when the sentence was handed down and when we all heard those words and processed that together, it was like a heartbreak and a grief of a whole community.
Yeah. It's really hard to hold on to, process, be in a space where injustice is so blatant. Really, really hard.
Yeah.
And, part of what also happens is we not only do we want to believe that justice is being served, but when that level of violence is right in front of us, we want to also find safety for ourselves. We want to know that, oh, maybe I can prevent this for my daughter, for my son, for me, but how do I do it? I mean, it's just overwhelming. It's absolutely overwhelming.
Yeah.
So come November, let's talk about Kara and talk about the reason why she will be a much better judge, not only for women, but for our county. Can we talk about that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, besides what I saw in her from, sitting on the other side of the desk where she was the one who was, running the legal show, Nikki felt safe with her and trusted her. And I also really admired her for her approach. But also, she's the only one who has been both a prosecutor and a defense attorney and a public defender, which I think people have a bad sense of what that is. But I think it's such an important role in our society. And she has seen the courtroom from both sides, whereas Judge McLaughlin has been a lifelong prosecutor. And I think it's really hard to, when you become a judge, you don't get all of your biases wiped clean. You're still a human with all of the experiences that you have going into it. So I think it's important to realize what kind of experiences they have had. And Kara is well-rounded and she is fair and she is about safety. She could say it so much better than me. I mean, we don't work for her or anything, but we know her enough to be able to say that we were willing to say anybody but McLaughlin, honestly.
Yeah.
But knowing her, we were so relieved.
It was a huge breath of relief for our whole entire group. And there are 13 of us on the committee. And for us to all just have one cohesive moment of relief and feel positive was such a nice thing, because we haven't gotten that many of these types of moments. And it was oh, thank God, somebody who will do right by everybody in this county. And particularly, today we're talking about women and victims of abuse. And we're just very confident that, because we did witness Kara being open to learning, that's so incredibly important for a 10-year-long position in a rapidly changing world. It's so important to be open to learning, right? And we did see that. And so that gives us a great feeling of comfort.
Yeah. And I want to remind the listeners, it's a 10-year term, but they can be reelected. Yeah. 10 years becomes 20 years. It becomes a kind of a lifetime job that, over those years, boy, you can influence the courts around you, the policies around you, communities, vast communities.
Yeah. Because what happens behind closed doors with domestic violence, we know doesn't stay behind closed doors. It ripples out into communities. And the same thing with courtrooms.
That's right.
I mean, lives are ruined especially by excessive sentences, but by injustices that are done. I mean, any of us who experienced what happened with Nikki and were in that courtroom are still healing from what we experienced.
Yes.
Absolutely. I think it's a lifelong healing, quite frankly. And understandably, not just for Nikki, for everyone, all of you who know her intimately, who were in that courtroom. I have to say it out loud. We're living in a larger world right now where women and women's health and safety is really at risk, and the loss of body autonomy and rights feels like it's happening not only in the States, but certainly around the world. Yeah. So it's the ripple effect that we've talked about in so many of these contexts is happening again in the national newspapers as well.
Yeah.
So
I mean, in so many ways, what's happening nationally, we can feel helpless about at this stage, but we have a choice to make in November.
that's right.
And what do we stand for as a community?
Right.
What do we want to see for our daughters and sons who might end up in the criminal justice system? Or what do we stand for? It's so easy to just stay home, especially on an off year. A lot of people don't vote in the elections, but what happened to my sister is just one example of local elections going wrong with the wrong person in place.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. So for those of you listening, I mean, you have to get out and think about this vote deeply. We're not telling you, we can't tell you who to vote for. We can tell you our thoughts and our feelings about the sitting judge and the woman who is running against him. And the three of us clearly feel pretty strongly about this vote. But please educate yourself, because this is an opportunity to think not just about party lines, as Michelle mentioned earlier. I mean, listen, everyone on both sides of the table or sides of the aisle are either a parent or a sister or a brother, or know a woman who they feel strongly about. So let's get outside of the dynamic of the aisles and really think about the safety of women and their children, all families, and educate men, educate boys about how to be in relationship with women in a respectful, honest, nonviolent manner. That's part of our mission too. So, part of, I suspect, as you went through this, Linsey, having two sons, that must have impacted the way that you thought about raising them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. And it's been such a gift to have so much more language now surrounding those things, and understand that raising them from such a young age with talk about boundaries and consent and respecting people's bodies. Yeah, I've been very grateful to have that language, as well as be surrounded just by the other women on the committee who happen to all be fantastic mothers as well. And we've learned so much from one another as we've navigated this together. And our children have also witnessed the advocacy and been present at some of our, family-friendly events, and seen us, having to dip out at bedtime and go onto a committee call that would go late into the night, because it was so important for us to do that work. And I now think that them witnessing that is something I'm so incredibly proud that they saw us do good. And, you don't want them to know that the world is imperfect necessarily. And I think before all of this, I definitely just wanted them to look the other way when there was anything bad and turn off the news. And that's my natural inclination as a mother. And I now know that we talk about this, like, darkness hides in secrecy and silence. And so I would rather show them what is real, and also show them that there's also goodness that comes out of those things, and that it's our duty as people to do that work, because advocacy work is so heartbreaking and people need to take breaks from it and can't carry it alone. And so whenever anybody has ever shown up to us and said, how can we help? We're like, tell us, how can you help? What can you do? Like, what are your skills? What do you have to offer? Because we always want help. We always need support. It's a lot to carry, and heartbreaking work to kind of see, as we've talked about, the harm caused and the ripple effects of these types of things.
Yeah. I want to remind the audience that, what Michelle and Linsey have shared with us isn't just their opinion. I want to just read a quote that the higher court, when they resentenced Nikki, they issued a, quote, blistering rebuke of his antiquated viewpoints of domestic violence. And again, showed that he was one of the most reverse judges in New York because of his excessive sentencing. So antiquated viewpoints of domestic violence. I mean, that says it all, right?
I was going to say, they also said he had arcane beliefs.
Ooh.
And what I was going to say is they chose to resentence her themselves because there was a possibility, and we weren't sure what was going to happen, that if the appeal was granted, it could go back to his courtroom. And so from what we're hearing, again, in people in the legal world, we have heard that that was a really big deal, that they chose to resentence her themselves rather than leave it up to anybody else's interpretation.
Yeah. As rare as it is for an appeal to be successful, it's even more rare for them to write something like that about the sitting judge.
And to override the decision.
Yeah.
Yeah, to override the decision and to make those comments. Yeah. Well, good.
But even with all of that, there's no accountability. Yeah. The only accountability is election.
Yeah. And I think it's important to also say that this is definitely an underdog fight. I mean, he's very, very well connected in the community, of course.
Yeah.
So it really will require people showing up who don't usually show up. And that is a long shot. And we're just praying that people here believe women and trust us that this harm is not specific to this case. This harm has ripple effects all throughout our community. And we are shocked at how little press these types of stories get in our community when women are killed. It happens and it doesn't make the news. Nikki's story was, I guess salacious enough that it made news, which was terrible. Yeah. But we feel very confident, like Michelle shared earlier, that it would have gone differently. If Nikki hadn't done what she did, she wouldn't be here with us.
Yeah.
And so we just hope that people hear and are talking to one another and sharing with their friends and will show up.
Yeah. To reiterate, we can feel so overwhelmed by national politics right now. And so one thing that we can do is act locally. And even though this judge is part of the boys club, and we know he is, we can act against it and we can vote against him. So please, again, consider showing up on November 4th, 2025 and place a vote, thinking about the well-being of women, their children, and families, and our community as a whole. So we're coming to a close, and I just wondered if you have anything else that you want to say, point out, feel is important for our listeners to know about this election and its importance. It's a big question.
Well, there's this thing that happens in courtrooms that I've experienced, that if you say something, they just assume that it's true. And we're seeing this statement that Nikki reluctantly consented, which was something he said, really kind of sparked outrage when we shared it initially after sentencing, and it kind of took on a life of its own. And it's not hard for people to connect the dots that a judge who says something like that, their judgment is off. And so we have noticed in the comment sections of our social media posts where we talk about the election that people who are connected to Judge McLaughlin, like a wife, family members, have said that the term reluctantly consented came from Nikki, that he was quoting her. And I just need to go on the record to say I actually combed through the transcripts. There's a lot of transcripts. Not a single time did she say she reluctantly consented. In fact, every single time I typed in consent, did you consent to this? It was a no. So I just need people to know that just because a judge says something is true doesn't mean that it is. And she did not say that. It did not come from her.
Thank you.
And the fact that we've seen that in the comment sections of our We Stand With Nikki social media from his family members, shows us that this is what he's saying amongst his circle and what they are saying to refute what we have shared. And it's not true.
Yeah. Daunting. Yeah. So again, for those of you out there, please vote November 4th. It is so important. Is there anything that folks can do right now? Is it money? Is it, what should folks do who are listening, who say, I've got to act before November 4th, get Kara into the seat? What can they do?
Yes, they can go to Kara, Kara, for county court. Right now, Judge McLaughlin has a gigantic lead on her as far as money being raised. It's kind of common practice, which I didn't know, that lawyers give money to judges at elections and during fundraisers as kind of like good faith for the next time they show up in a courtroom, which I know. But it really
For those of
happened.
those who can't see me, I just had a very big sigh.
So there's a large disparity in the amount of money being raised. Although she's doing well, it is nothing compared to what he has done. And she does need, unfortunately, the way our political system works, money to be able to like run ads and get her name out there, because not everyone knows her as well as they know him.
Right.
Even if it's for a bad reason, they know his name. So there's, a button to donate, which anything you can possibly give is helpful at this stage.
Great.
And there's also, ways you can show up to volunteer. All of that's on her website.
Great.
Yeah, so you can sign up for the email list on her website, as we've all done, and we're doing whatever we can.
Great.
Not everybody has the money for funding, but if anybody happens to be listening and does, that is a significant way that she needs help now.
Great. And what GynoCurious is going to do in an effort to help this effort is, in the month of October, I'm going to re-air Michelle's conversation with me about her book, a conversation that I had with Nikki and Kellyanne, and then this one. So we'll be posting this again. And my hope is it's just a reminder of November 4th, and that we can make this vote count, not only to support Nikki and her family and all of these amazing folks who have supported her throughout, but for all the other victims, survivors of domestic violence, because their voice is often silenced. If it's not silenced, it's objected to. And if it's not objected to, it's reinterpreted and changed. So we are here to speak as clearly as we can about what we know to be true. Yeah. I want to let the listeners know that, as we were saying goodbye, Michelle and Linsey shared something with me that I just had to. I just had to have you hear because it is so audacious and concerning on so many levels that I felt it prudent that we reveal this. So who wants to tell the story?
Okay, I can tell the story because it happened to me. So right now it's campaigning season, and they're canvassing door to door. And the other day we got a knock on our door, and it was Judge McLaughlin campaigning. Nikki opened the door. I was there. And he looked shocked to the point where I can't think it was like an intimidating move. It was more what I would like to believe, and what I do believe, is that it was carelessness,
right,
and arrogance, to not realize, look at the last name of who is on the house deed that you're going to, and realize that it's the same last name as someone that you sentenced to 19 years to life. And Nikki was stunned, as she would be. And, for all of us, it's like equal parts like confounding and horrifying. But the reality is, this is Nikki's safe space. Like,
right,
we worked really hard to be able to get a home where she can feel anonymous and safe. And I won't speak for Nikki, but I feel like she would be okay with me saying that, like, her sense of safety was definitely rocked after that.
Yeah.
And I just really think it speaks to his judgment again, like that he wouldn't be more careful with whose doors he's knocking on.
Totally agree. Linsey, you have anything to add?
I mean, when I got the text, I said something is wrong. There's no way this actually happened. I was in complete shock. It was devastating to me as Nikki's friend because, like Michelle said, that's her safe space, and there's no violation like opening the door and seeing the person who called you a broken person, the person who sentenced you to a life sentence away from your children, standing there. Just to circle back to the no accountability of the judge, we had posted that on our social media on the We Stand With Nikki, kind of as like, we were saying, get a Cara Gary sign, get a lawn sign. If you get a lawn sign, maybe it'll prevent him from showing up at your door like he did to Nikki, which was very benign compared to what we could have done. I mean, we could have shared the Ring camera footage and we didn't. So we had shared that, and somebody in his camp had commented and said that we shouldn't be saying that because, I forget the exact language, but that it was an upsetting, embarrassing moment for him and we shouldn't be sharing it or something.
Yeah,
like
that they were uncomfortable.
They were uncomfortable, him and the other gentleman that he was canvassing with. And we were just like, I mean, the eye roll heard around the world. We were like, are you kidding me?
let's have him sit in jail for a few years. And that's what's uncomfortable. Uncomfortable.
Mhm.
But the fact that he showed up there and then that was
Their
other
response.
than tail between the legs, shame, an apology.
Apology. That's right. That's right.
And I think when you are a judge who's criticized for so much excessive sentencing, you probably should have a list of where to canvas
That's right.
and check it twice.
Or maybe someone on his campaign should be teaching this man some humanity, manners,
Humility.
humility.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We would all
Ugh.
feel so different had there been any apology.
Yeah.
I don't know what it would have done for Nikki, but it would have been something.
It would have
Really-
helped. It would have helped, I suspect.
I just, again, really think this speaks to his character that
Yeah.
when now we're in a campaigning, cycle and us on the committee, we are airing things as we have always about Judge McLaughlin. And now it might be ramped up because there is an actual thing we want people to do. His response time and time again is to blame Nikki. Well, you shouldn't, you made him feel uncomfortable. You said reluctant consent when it was like, can you just take any accountability, any self-reflection and say, you know what, I may have misstepped. There's none of that, which I think I know I want. I can't speak for what other people want, but I want that in someone who's making giant judicial decisions.
Right. The narrative has been for so long about blaming the victim. And there is a response to that. That can change that narrative. Behaviors, words, legal action, that can change the narrative. And that's hopefully the role of progress and learning. And again, humility. It's exactly what it's about. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I just felt compelled to put that out there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me today. I'm so, so grateful. Yeah. And thank you to Jen Hammoud and Matt Rosenberg, my co-producers, and to David Hoffman, who's my editor. To all of you listening, I'm so, so grateful for your willingness to spend time with me. And please be well and listen to your instincts and intuitions. They are the greatest of teachers, not to be ignored.